Dun, 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 dun. Aloha Cafe Radio.
Imagine you generate a QR code for a project, right? You print it out. The little black and white squares look completely perfect.
Oh yeah, they always look fine to the naked eye.
Exactly. But then when you actually scan it, your phone just flashes this incredibly frustrating message.
Yeah.
Like, this page does not exist.
Which is just the worst feeling.
It really is. Anyway, welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, here with our resident expert, and our mission today is exploring a really fascinating framework for how communities are actually built.
Right, we're looking at how they handle truth and what it really means to be unified.
Yeah. And to do this, we're digging into a manuscript of a message titled A Church Built the Right Way.
Which was delivered by Pastor Tsushinamoto at Kahului Union Church. That's over on the island of Maui, Hawaii.
Right, on May 3, 2026.
Yeah, and it's just this really profound piece of source material. I mean, it takes a very specific text, Ephesians chapter 4, and it uses it to ask some incredibly universal questions.
Questions about, like, how humans gather, right?
Exactly. How we build trust, and honestly, how we keep from tearing each other apart when we inevitably disagree.
Yeah, which is so relevant. But before we get too far in, I do want to explicitly clarify something right up front for you listening.
Oh, definitely. Good call.
While this deep dive does unpack a religious text and, very specific theological viewpoints from Pastor Nemoto's message, our goal here isn't to endorse these beliefs.
Right. We are absolutely not preaching a sermon today.
Exactly. We just want to impartially examine the source's really compelling ideas about community, truth, and human connection, because there is a lot to learn here.
There really is.
So, okay, let's unpack this. And I want to start with that QR code thing, because the source uses this highly relatable anecdote.
It's such a great hook.
It is. So Pastor Nemoto was creating these Aloha Cafe Radio cards for their ministry.
Right. Trying to link people to a YouTube channel.
Yeah, exactly. He creates the code, but that very first one he generated was just slightly off.
And the detail here is what makes the metaphor work so perfectly. Because when he compared that broken QR code to the correct one later, they look virtually identical.
Right, like just a tiny bit of static or whatever.
Yeah, but that tiny, almost invisible structural deviation completely ruined the function.
Wow.
The data didn't just fail to load. The structure essentially turned the data into misinformation. It literally pointed to a void.
Right, this page does not exist, which introduces this massive tension regarding how we process information today.
Oh, absolutely.
The source argues that this perfectly mirrors our modern human struggle.
Yeah.
Like, truth might actually exist out there perfectly intact.
Yes.
But if our internal sensor, the structure we use to receive that truth, is even slightly off, we miss it entirely.
We completely miss it. We can be looking right at reality, but our internal structure translates it into an error message.
Which is wild to think about.
And if we think about how that applies broadly, I mean, it explains so much of our current cultural frustration.
Oh, for sure.
We have more access to facts than any generation in history.
Literally in our pocket.
Right. Yet we're more confused and divided than ever. And the source suggests the problem isn't the availability of the data. The problem is the structural alignment of the receiver.
Okay, wait. So if a community, or even just an individual, has a fundamentally flawed internal structure,
Then pouring more information into them doesn't fix the problem. It just generates more error messages.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay, but realizing that the internal structure is flawed immediately raises a really practical problem.
Right. How do we fix it?
Exactly. How do we
Well-
calibrate ourselves to properly receive truth?
Well, the source argues that to answer that, we have to look at the actual blueprint of how a community is built.
Okay.
And it strongly insists that a church, or honestly any genuine community, isn't about the appearance of a building.
Right. It's not the real estate.
No, and it's not about the logo or the organizational chart either. It is
Yeah.
entirely about the materials. And the materials are the people.
Okay, but let's look at the reality of that. Because the text grounds this in a very specific, practical situation, right?
Yeah, it notes that many churches in Japan, as well as this particular Japanese ministry in Hawaii, they're often very small.
Like, how small are we talking?
We are talking gatherings of around 20 people.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is small.
Right, and in a setting that small, you just do not have specialized departments. One single person might be juggling the bookkeeping, cleaning the facility, and teaching,
All at the same time.
all at the same time.
See, I have to push back here a little bit. Because in modern contexts, whether it's a small church, a neighborhood watch, or a startup, Volunteering is almost entirely based on availability.
Sure.
It kind of has to be because it's practical. If a community group only has 20 people, you just need someone, literally anyone, to hold the flashlight.
Right.
You just ask, like, hey, who has a free hour on Tuesdays? And whoever raises their hand gets the job.
Right.
So doesn't the source say that's the wrong approach?
It does. And what's fascinating here is how the text uses a house blueprint analogy to explain why.
Okay, lay it on me.
It argues that building a community based merely on whoever happens to be available is like building a house by just walking through a forest, grabbing whatever random sticks and stones you find, throwing them in a huge pile, and just hoping a structure magically emerges.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a disaster.
Exactly. You don't gather random materials first and
Yeah.
then try to figure out what to build.
Right.
You have to start with a design. You start with a blueprint based on a specific purpose.
And in the context of Pastor Nemoto's message, that blueprint is Christ.
Precisely. Which completely flips the modern volunteer model on its head.
It really does.
The source points to specific roles mentioned in the book of Ephesians. Things like apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher.
Right.
And it argues these aren't just casual hobbies. They aren't just slots to fill on a sign-up sheet just because someone is free on a Tuesday.
They're intentional.
Yes, they are appointed by God. The text defines ministry, whether it's something massive like global outreach or something as seemingly mundane as cleaning the floors, as an entrusted placement.
An entrusted placement. That changes the stakes completely.
It really does.
Because it means you aren't just a random brick doing the group a favor. You're a specific material chosen for a specific structural purpose.
Yes. Think about it like this. If an evangelist is the door bringing people in, a teacher is the foundation keeping them stable.
Oh, I like that.
You cannot build a house entirely out of doors.
No, that would be terrible.
Right. And you can't build one entirely out of foundations either.
Which explains why the source is so adamant that the size of the gathering literally does not matter.
Exactly. A 20-person church can be perfectly structurally sound, and a 2,000-person church can be on the verge of total collapse.
Wow.
What actually matters is whether the body is properly equipped according to that blueprint. Every material has to be doing the specific work it was designed to do.
Okay, but wait. If a community is made up of all these highly specific, totally different materials, like you have a teacher who wants things super methodical, a prophet who demands immediate change, a pastor who just wants to focus on comforting people,
Right.
wouldn't they just inevitably clash? Like, wouldn't they just tear the house apart? Because if you ask most people today, unity means everyone thinks the exact same way.
Oh, absolutely. That is the modern assumption. If you're unified, you agree on the politics, the methods, the pacing, everything.
Right. So how does the source reconcile all these diverse people with unity without it just becoming an echo chamber?
Well, that brings us directly to the source's redefinition of unity.
Right.
And it is arguably the most countercultural point in the entire manuscript.
Okay, let's hear it.
We often mistake identical opinions for unity. But the source argues that true unity is not about everyone thinking the exact same way. It is about everyone facing the same direction.
Facing the same direction. That is such a vital distinction because it allows for friction. It means two totally different materials can expand and contract differently under stress, but they still hold the building up together.
Exactly. And to understand how that actually works, we have to look at the two specific areas where the text says this unity must exist.
Okay.
The first is faith. And the text defines this not just as some vague sense of belief, but as a shared foundation regarding human nature and salvation.
Right. Things like acknowledging sin, repentance, confession, salvation, hope,
Yes, exactly.
the bedrock principles.
Yeah, the absolute bedrock. And then the second area is the knowledge of Christ.
Okay, and what does that entail?
This means a common, shared understanding of who he is, what he taught, and what he accomplished.
Ah, I see.
That is the true north. If the community shares that foundation of faith and is facing that shared knowledge of Christ, they are unified.
That makes so much sense.
Everything else, different personalities, different cultural backgrounds, disagreements over how to run a meeting, it's just the natural friction of diverse materials.
And the text is actually incredibly realistic about that human friction, too.
It really is.
It outright says that disagreements are normal. And this is where we get to a really fascinating nuance in the original language of Ephesians that the source highlights.
Oh, yes. The Greek word teleos.
Right, kilios.
It's often translated in English texts as maturity or sometimes even perfect.
Which sounds intimidating.
Very. But the source clarifies that it absolutely does not mean perfection in the sense of never making a mistake or never arguing.
Right, because if it meant perfection, the whole community model would collapse on day one.
Exactly. Nobody is perfect. Teleos actually refers to a state of growing toward completion.
Like a dynamic motion.
Yes, think of it as a process. If you have two people in a community who vehemently disagree on how to solve a problem,
Right.
but both of them are actively growing toward that shared understanding of Christ, if they are both in a state of teleos, they are unified. They are mature.
Oh, wow. Which takes us right back to that scattered QR code hook.
It really does.
If the direction of the community isn't aligned toward that true north, what happens?
Well, the text describes people getting tossed around by every new teaching or cultural trend.
Right. Someone says, oh, this new philosophy sounds good, or that person is really charismatic. Let's just follow them.
Yeah, and if the direction is scattered like that, the foundation becomes fundamentally unstable.
Because you're no longer building according to the blueprint.
Exactly. You are just reacting to the environment. And this is a really crucial warning from the source. No matter how active a church is, no matter how many friendly events they host, or how much good they seem to be doing, if that internal structure is wrong, it leads nowhere.
It's just a dead link.
Yes.
The activity is basically meaningless without the proper alignment. I mean, you think about the last time you, listening to this, were in a really tense meeting at work or a frustrating family argument.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. Were you arguing because you actually wanted the organization of the family to go in completely different directions? Or were you just two different materials reacting differently to the same stress, but ultimately trying to build the same house?
That is the defining question for any group trying to stay together. I mean, God is not gathering people with identical opinions. According to this message, He is forming a people who face the same direction, growing toward completion.
Okay, so facing the same direction is a beautiful concept.
It is.
But let's look at the actual mechanics of it. How is that maintained in practice? Like when people actually disagree or when someone makes a massive mistake, how do you keep the materials from cracking?
Right, the real-world application.
Yeah. To answer that, the source points to the catalyst of growth, which is the mechanism of relationship. And it hinges on balancing two highly volatile elements.
Truth and love.
Exactly.
If the blueprint is the structural design and facing the same direction is the orientation, then truth and love are the actual mortar holding those diverse bricks together.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the text brings up that famous phrase, speaking the truth in love.
Right, we hear that all the time.
We do. But the source frames it by showing what happens when you separate those two concepts, which honestly our modern culture tends to do constantly.
Oh, completely.
The text argues that truth alone can wound and destroy relationships, while love alone just blurs truth and causes confusion.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, let's unpack the psychological mechanism behind that because it is brilliant.
Please do.
Think about what truth without love actually functions as in a community. It isn't a building tool, it's a wrecking ball.
A wrecking ball.
Yeah, if you see a cracked brick in the wall and you just hurl the unvarnished, brutal truth at it without any care for the person, you might be factually correct about the crack.
Right, the crack is real.
But you haven't repaired the wall, you've just knocked it down entirely. It alienates the person receiving it and completely destroys trust.
Yes. You're technically right, but you're structurally destructive.
Yeah.
And then look at the flip side of that. Love without truth.
Oh, yeah.
That is essentially toxic positivity.
It really is.
It's seeing the foundational crack in the wall and just pretending it's not there because you don't want to make the brick feel bad. You just put a nice coat of paint over the crack in the name of keeping the peace.
And the source notes that this creates profound confusion because the standard of reality is just lost.
Right.
The blueprint is abandoned just to avoid an awkward conversation.
Wow.
And eventually the house collapses because love without truth cannot bear any actual weight.
Which explains why the source emphasizes that spiritual growth is never an isolated individual endeavor.
No, it can't be.
You cannot just go sit on a mountain by yourself, read some books, and achieve teleos. Growth only happens within connection.
The text actually uses the metaphor of an interconnected body to explain this.
Oh, like a physical body.
Right. In a physical body, one injured part affects the whole system. If your foot is injured, your back compensates, your posture misaligns, and suddenly your neck aches.
Everything is connected.
Exactly. The church, or really any community, works the exact same way. Growth doesn't happen just because you have a great leader or a meticulously organized calendar. It happens when every single part does its specific work, holding the tension of truth and love.
And holding that tension requires a very specific, demanding definition of love.
It does.
Because the love described in this message isn't just a passive emotion.
No, it's not.
It isn't just feeling warmly towards someone. The source says love is active. It is expressed through supporting one another, encouraging one another, and notably, correcting one another.
And correction is perhaps the ultimate, most difficult form of speaking the truth in love,
Oh, I bet.
because it requires everything we've talked about so far to be working simultaneously.
Wait, how so? Walk us through the mechanics of that.
Okay, so to correct someone effectively, you first need the blueprint. You have to understand your entrusted role and their entrusted role.
Right, the foundation.
Second, you need unity.
Uh.
You both have to be facing the same direction, sharing that foundation of faith so that there is an agreed upon standard to correct toward.
Okay, that makes sense.
And third, it requires immense vulnerability.
Yeah, nobody likes being corrected.
Exactly. You cannot correct someone if you are throwing truth like a wrecking ball. And you cannot correct someone if your version of love is so fragile that it avoids conflict at all costs.
Right.
You have to bind the truth to the love. You have to point out the crack in the brick while simultaneously providing the actual mortar to fix it.
Man. So what does this all mean for us? If we take all these pieces and look at the complete picture Pastor Nomoto has painted in this manuscript,
Right.
true community growth isn't an accident. It doesn't happen just because a group of nice, available people decide to hang out in the same room once a week.
No, it's highly intentional.
According to this message, it requires standing on a deliberate, entrusted foundation. The blueprint. It requires moving in one unified direction, which means facing toward a shared knowledge of Christ, not forcing everyone into an echo chamber of identical opinions.
Right.
And it requires remaining deeply connected through the difficult daily friction of holding truth and love together.
And that framework is startlingly applicable to you listening right now, regardless of your personal background or beliefs.
Oh, 100%.
Whether you are examining a religious congregation, or managing a highly stressed corporate team, organizing a local charity, or just navigating your own family dynamics.
Yeah, it applies everywhere.
We live in an era where the very concept of objective truth is heavily debated, and where communities fracture instantly over the smallest disagreements. The challenge of pursuing truth without destroying each other in the process is arguably the defining challenge of our modern age.
It really makes you reconsider every group chat you're in, every neighborhood meeting you attend, every interaction with a coworker.
It does.
Are we just a pile of random materials reacting to stress, or are we actively building something with intent?
That leads to a really important question, and it is something I want to leave you, the listener, to ponder long after this deep dive ends.
Okay, let's hear it.
We talked about how a tiny structural flaw in a QR code's internal sensor turns the right destination into a dead end.
Right.
And we talked about how true unity does not require us to have identical opinions, but simply to face the same direction.
Yeah.
So if we take those two concepts to heart, what does that mean for how we handle our deepest disagreements today? Are we tearing our own communities apart simply because we are mistaking a mere difference of opinion for a difference in direction?
Wow. That is a question worth carrying with you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Fear is one of a kind of grow. People say, let's go grow. Hawaiian island vibe, gentle inside.